Hi guys, I'm Aussie Expat and welcome. Today we have a beautiful sunny day here in Las Vegas and it's just absurd the weather we're getting right now, all in the 70s, and it makes me feel like, why am I still working? Well, the reason I'm still working is I'm still trying to buy Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin's down to 84,000 today and that seems significant to many people, but here's a little perspective. Nothing has changed. Literally nothing about Bitcoin has changed. There's not a new shithead CEO. There aren't revenues next quarter that are predicted to go down. Even if the economy is shit this way, that or the other, Bitcoin hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. The code is still there, working away, doing what it does. Bitcoin is being Bitcoin. That's it. There's no other things to think about with Bitcoin, and that's why it's a hold regardless of the price. And when the price is better, it's better, okay? And what we're experiencing right now, I think we're like 20% decline from the top. That's not even a bear market yet. You need like a 30% before anyone even blinks, you know what I mean? But that's part of the problem. Before anyone blinks, everyone's getting very, very, how would you say, they're looking at their charts, they're saying, you know, this sort of level is normal. I saw a few people talk about like, 72, 75, that sort of number going down to. So the problem is, how many people are thinking like that? And honestly, volatility has to shake out a lot of people. And just for context, when we say shake out people, I mean retail guys like you or me. That's the people that keep shaking out. And all of these declines, all of the movement is going from small hands to very big whales, you know, wallets of more than 100 coins. The reality is that there's a very select number of people or institutions that have more commitment than most of us. And the real question is how cheaply are some people going to sell their Bitcoin for? It's a race. The volatility is there to make sure that you don't get any. I was asked this morning from someone, like, oh wow, 84K, we're down, you know, we have broken a support line or whatever, you know, chart magicians and wizards have broken a support line, and yeah, it has. So guess what it did? It hit one of my buy orders. So I always have a snake in the grass buy order. I know volatility is there. I use it in my favor. Now, in the long term, whether or not I buy at 85K, 95K, 75K, 100K, it doesn't matter. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and eventually the US dollar will be worthless. If you look at a graph looking at US dollars to Bitcoin, US dollars have already hit worthlessness, utter trash, and it's a mathematical function. You're gonna have to keep zooming in to see how worthless USD is over the long course of time. And it may not be my generation that experiences, you know, the true rout of USD and it being, you know, fully capitulated and nobody even wants it right now. Let's get onto that perspective. Look, all fiat, all 170 to 190 trillion of it, nobody actually wants it. Nobody actually wants it, and yet it's worth 170 to 190 trillion. What do they want? They want real investments. They want to go into S&P 500. They might do gold. They might do real estate. A lot of it's real estate, honestly. And the reality is it's not because they genuinely think these are, you know, the absolute best investments. They are just the way to preserve wealth. You know, for a lot of whales out there, you know, they've sort of I'm not saying all, but there's a lot of like family offices, and really the focus isn't on 10xing or whatever. You know what I mean? That's sort of a poor person's game. And not to be offensive, I mean, I come from literally nothing, but someone with like substantial wealth isn't focused on how do you 10x in the next 2 to 3 years. They're looking at how to diversify, have their hands in a lot of pockets, trying to figure out, a good alpha for their risk and so forth, not to get completely eroded. And one of their holdings is not going to be, a substantial amount of cash. The cash serves as a buffer for volatility. And if Bitcoin wasn't volatile, all the money, all the available capital would already have flew straight into it. You know what I mean? It would have flown into there already. So it's only the volatility that gives you these opportunities. You should embrace it. You should embrace it. And the volatility comes, hopefully, without any bad news. These are the ideal times to be buying, because why is something down? It's like literally nothing happened. We're not even talking about China banning Bitcoin for the 50th time in the last 12 months. You know what I mean? We're not even talking about negative regulatory action and a little spookiness, a little bit of FUD. There's no FUD. It's just price movement being what it is. It just has to remain volatile. And I'm not going to tell you, what the exact price is that you buy in at and so forth. In the long span of time, and we are talking generations, so there's no get rich quick type stuff here. You're going to be measuring your wealth in Bitcoin. How much do you have? 0.05, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 1, 5, 10, 20, 100? How much Bitcoin do you have? There's people out there that have got zero. They have zero. They have the ability to buy, but they don't. And a lot of the stories they tell themselves is like, oh, when it's a good time to enter, then I will buy. The problem with that is they're not gaining the experience of holding something that is that crazy volatile. And they'll sell out the next time, the chart does this. Whichever direction causes them to justify their actions, that's what will happen. So you need to actually buy some, hold it, whatever you're comfortable with, you know what I mean? And if it's too much and you find yourself, oh, this is going to wreck my life if it goes to X or Y or Z. Well, number one, I'm not exactly sure why it would wreck your life, because at this point in time, you should be buying and preparing to hold for a very long time. So if you're buying with money that you need next week or next year, you've lost. You've lost. You really need to find enough capital that you can actually hold on to it. That's the real key, is holding on. Trust me, nothing's going to change with Bitcoin. Nothing's actually going to change. It's like the price is going to go up and down or this way or that. Nothing's going to change with Bitcoin. There's not going to be some new CEO. There's not, even like Ethereum, man, that $1.6 billion hack. Oh my God, social engineering. There's talk of within Ethereum of perhaps doing a fork, because they've done it before. When there's a hack, just fork the chain and make it go away, because it's genuinely bad news, right? It is bad news. Ethereum being, having a large substantial holding. The problem is it's a utility token. Well, let me correct this. The problem is it's a utility token. And that's why I've gotten rid of all of my Ethereum. I was under a bit of a spell, honestly. I had purchased a bit of Ethereum before the ETF, and I started understanding it a little bit better. About 2 years ago, 2 to 18 months, 2 years to 18 months ago, I was starting to understand it a little bit better. But the thing that I understood was like, wow, this really does have really good use. Like there are good reasons to it. Like DeFi is real. My opinion on that front hasn't changed. However, DeFi and utility tokens is here to stay, but it's the prospect of putting your money into, say, Ethereum or Solana is far more akin to putting your money into, say, JP Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs or something like that. They may be good investments while what they're offering is favorable, but a newcomer could come along and do something that is more favorable in a different area. And while I tell you of like two very successful banks, right? Goldman tried to get into the credit card game with, the Apple Card, and they lost billions and billions of dollars. Like they just couldn't make money out of it. And I think they're trying to find a way out, or they spin it. The Apple wants to find a new bank, but it just goes to show that like even quote unquote successful banks, they have like, if they step out of their domain, they may not find strength, and that's the story of utility tokens too, is that there may be specific applications that a utility token is strong at, and then another token might come out that has made different compromises that makes it stronger in another dimension. And in reality, I think that's the story of Solana. I think everything that Solana does can be done on Ethereum, but on Solana, it's a little bit simpler. It's a little bit easier for the customer experience. The transaction rates are, high, quote unquote, although Ethereum has been, really ramping that up, I think, 5x in the last, 12 months. But there you go. I mean, just that sort of adds to the case. The issue is that Solana have fundamentally made choices that remove stability from that platform. They've had lots of outages, blah, blah, blah. Now, the outages don't matter if the only thing happening on it is trading of meme coins, which has really been the story of the last 6 to 12 months. So in terms of that platform, it's perfect. But anyone who wants to seriously conduct business, I think Ethereum makes sense. The problem is the number of use cases for that sort of quote-unquote serious business. It's not a lot. It's not a lot. I think they can be quite critical, like contracts and royalties and tracking of ownership. There are a lot of things that I think the blockchain and a blockchain like Ethereum can definitely support. It's just that they're not going to generate like newfound value. Now, they can enable new businesses like resale markets of certain things, whether it's event tickets or so forth, but you have an existing monopoly on event tickets that are not going away just because the payment platform for that event ticket could be made simpler or better. Like Ticketmaster's a whole nother thing, but that would be a prime industry to disrupt with crypto. But there's frictions, and you look at Ticketmaster's profit margin, that's the value. That's roughly the value. Like your competitor's profit is your opportunity. That's the opportunity. Like what's Ethereum's market cap compared to Ticketmaster, considering it doesn't even do that. It doesn't do the Ticketmaster thing. That being said, just pure DeFi alone is still pretty cool, but it does eventually need to attach to real world use cases, in my opinion. That being said, maybe pure financial, DeFi is cool too. What I'm getting at is there's a lot of use cases out there that these utility tokens compete for, and they'll always be competing, and there's always opportunity for disruption. And if there's an advantage at some point, that advantage can be eroded by another coin that makes different choices. and does certain things better or simpler for the time. It doesn't even need to be in perpetuity. I think that really is what's happened with, Ethereum giving up a lot of ground to Solana, is that just the choices made by Solana are the right choices right now, while Ethereum has always been, really thinking very, very, very far ahead, and in some ways almost ignoring what is needed now. In that way, it copies Bitcoin in a way, in that a lot of the things that Bitcoin solves for are problems that we need to be concerned about, both short and long term, but there's definitely a long term perspective. One of the things that I've been very, very proud of, admire about Bitcoin, is that they've kept the node sizes to a very, very small footprint in terms of system requirements. And this means that everyone talks about the miners and control, and the reality is it's actually the nodes that really perpetuate the network. Now, they're not authoring new blocks. That is the miners. But the nodes will not transmit the blocks if they think they are, Fugazi. So there will be a split in the network, not necessarily in the blockchain. Eventually there should be a split in the blockchain. Like there'll be just say you have quote unquote 51% attack at the miner level. If the nodes don't agree, they won't transmit that block, and the block that is the next valid block, it comes out of the 30%. But effectively the nodes will not transmit a chain that has invalid blocks. It's really that simple. So it's more than just you need 51% of the mining capacity. You also need 51% of the actual node network as well. And you can participate in the node network with as little as one CPU core. I estimate that out of a 1 gigahertz, out of a 2.2 gigahertz Ryzen processor, just one of its 8 cores used at maybe 20-30%, with I think it's about 800 gigabytes of storage is enough to run a full node on Bitcoin. Meanwhile, on Ethereum, I think you need 5 to 6 terabytes of NVMe storage, and it's really quite an amazing amount of hardware that you need to participate. So they've gone for, in my opinion, a very centralized route, very high power, high bandwidth requirement, and it's fundamentally not secure from a decentralization perspective. But that's not the thing they're fighting for. They want to actually do compute and so on and so forth on top of Ethereum. So they've made some of the choices that they have. Solana takes that to the next extreme, where effectively, I know they're changing it right now, but right now, effectively, if you're able to build the fastest computer on the planet, then your computer will be the one that's responsible for maintaining the blockchain on Solana. It's literally just a race, and if other people can't keep up, they're, at a singular computer level, then that's that. So effectively, Solana is not really decentralized at all. It's hyper centralized. It's just that who carries the baton changes to whoever's the fastest runner. Now, as I said, that doesn't mean that there aren't nodes that will call out, faulty, new blocks and so forth. But yeah, it just fundamentally different choices. That from one end of the spectrum, Bitcoin being hyper distributed, easy for people to run nodes and participate in the network, you have, all these different choices, and basically all the utility tokens will always be fighting for each other's piece of the pie. And yes, the whole pie will grow in size, it will, but it's not a case of you can just buy and hold something and then you're going to be good. Am I saying Ethereum's going down? I don't know. It didn't even come close to its all-time highs in this last cycle, and it's only been giving up ground in terms of market share. And is it going to reverse that? That's a tough one. It's a tough one. But, I would probably just stay out of it. If you don't want to perform that analysis between all the different, utility tokens and figure out which one's got the advantage over the next 6 months, and more importantly, which one has an advantage that other people will also recognize in the next 6 months, like, who the heck knows? Bitcoin is the only standard that's actually competing for being a store of wealth for the long term. And while previously I'd been more of the mindset that the value is in its transactions, as in like real world transactions, me buying an AMC movie ticket, with Bitcoin and so forth, I think that component has to be there, but it doesn't have to be Bitcoin's story for the next 10 years, right? The problem with focusing on the transactions is it will necessarily mean, increased bandwidth requirements and compute requirements that would take it beyond that, single node computer, Raspberry Pi level of node. And I think securing Bitcoin and making sure it stays decentralized is more important up until we get close to taking over actual currencies. And actual currencies are in the 140 to 200 trillion market cap, that sort of range, like the paper flowing around to make the gears of the world move. Eventually, that's my price target for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's currently like 2 trillion, something like that, rounding up. So it means we're talking about another 100x to go, add another 2 zeros to the current price. So a million, 10 million, 10 million range sort of thing per Bitcoin. Eventually. Now there'll be wars, there'll be fights, people will kick and scream. It could get nasty, or it could just be, a graceful collapse of the fiat currencies into something that's better. It'd be like, one scenario could be, it'd be like the demise of feature phones. It's like, oh, okay, well, this is a better phone, fundamentally different in so many ways, but okay, well, I'll stop buying the feature phones and I'll buy an iPhone or a Samsung. It's really that simple. Eventually, better stuff replaces, not so great stuff, but it takes time. It takes a really long time, especially when you're relying on so much of the network effects to be true. Obviously, a great hindrance right now is still regulatory. It's kind of a good season right now for the regulation side of things to be friendly. It does help Bitcoin. It's not fundamentally broken if it doesn't, but it does help. It is nice to have friends right now and go from there. So I think TLDR, nothing has changed with Bitcoin. Now, the route in all of the altcoins, completely plausible. Those may not come back. Bitcoin, nothing has changed. I highly suggest you start focusing on your net worth being how many Bitcoin you hold and not worry about the US dollar price, because your US dollar is going down. It's really that simple. The US dollar is going down. Nothing's going to outperform Bitcoin. If you had to pick, what's the asset or asset class that will outperform over the next 20, 30, 40 years, with in general populations declining in the West, and hopefully that remains the case so that there's a few more resources to go around and us focus on, quality of life for every citizen. That would be nice. I don't really care about GDP. I just care about quality of life. So is this possible? Is it possible that there's another asset class that we're not really thinking about? Is your house going to go up in price? And even if your house went up in price, would you care? Like, as in, like, you're still living in the same house. I mean, the analogy is that, if you're physically living in it, what does it matter that the value of it went up? At all, like, just at all. My mum, she lives in a small detached dwelling in Australia, 2-bedroom, and when she bought it was like 100,000 or 98,000, something like that. Now it's somewhere like 500,000. Place hasn't changed. In fact, all of there's a few businesses around her that are now closed. Traffic is exponentially worse. The country in which it's situated, Australia, has just gotten, brutally expensive. So the reality is, like, who cares if your price, house price went up? I mean, I thought this was something we learned in like 2008, that really, like, real estate going up is like a really toxic idea. Like, this is a consumer product. We should be getting better at building more housing units, not worse. And I know land is like, oh, there's not enough land. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of cities with a lot of sprawl, and I've seen towers that, go hundreds of meters into the sky. And if I didn't have a family, I'd totally go back into an apartment for sure. All right. I hope you guys are keeping your head out there. Until next time, see you around.